Weeks passed and the hunts continued. Each battle reminded me of the darkness lurking in the world, but I faced each challenge with unwavering determination. Lydia's support and order were invaluable. We made a formidable team together. One evening, as I sat on my porch enjoying a rare moment of peace, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Lydia. "Mr. Grayson, we have uncovered a new threat. A cult of necromancers has been raising the dead in the nearby city. Their leader is attempting to create an army of the undead. We need your help." With a sigh, I got to my feet, already reaching for my gear. The hunt never truly ended, and there was always another monster to face. As I drove towards the city, the sun setting behind me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This was what I lived for, what I was born to do, because I was Jackson Grayson, the best monster hunter this side of the Rockies, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. The city was alive with activity as I drove through the streets, the neon lights casting an eerie glow on the buildings. I parked my truck near the outskirts, not wanting to draw too much attention. Lydia had sent me the coordinates of the cult's hideout, an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. As I approached the warehouse, I felt a familiar sense of unease. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the shadows seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. I checked my gear one last time: silver bullets, holy water, salt, and a few other tools of the trade. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I had to be prepared for anything. I pushed open the heavy metal door and stepped inside. The interior of the warehouse was dark and foreboding, the air filled with the stench of rot. I moved cautiously through the space, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. In the distance, I could hear the faint sound of chanting, growing louder with each step I took. The chanting led me to a large open area in the center of the warehouse. A group of robed figures stood in a circle, their voices rising and falling in a rhythmic chant. At the center of the circle was a large ornate altar, covered in strange symbols and surrounded by flickering candles. The leader of the cult, a tall, skeletal figure with hollow eyes, stood at the head of the altar, his hands raised high as he chanted in a guttural language. The air around him crackled with dark energy, and I could see the forms of the dead beginning to rise from the ground, their eyes glowing with an unholy light. I took a deep breath and stepped into the open, raising my rifle. "All right, everyone, party's over. Drop the necromancy and step away from the altar." The chanting stopped abruptly, and the robed figures turned to face me, their eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and anger. The leader of the cult narrowed his eyes, a sneer curling his lips. "Who dares to interrupt our sacred ritual?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the warehouse. "Jackson Grayson, monster hunter extraordinaire," I replied, my voice steady. "Now be good little necromancers and back away from the altar, or things are going to get messy." The cult leader laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You are a fool to challenge us, Hunter. Our power is beyond your comprehension." I fired a shot, the bullet striking the ground at the cult leader's feet. "Last warning, step away from the altar." The cult leader's eyes blazed with fury, and he raised his hands, dark energy swirling around him. "Kill him," he commanded, his voice filled with rage. The robed figures lunged at me, their hands crackling with dark magic. I fired shot after shot, each bullet finding its mark and sending the necromancers crumpling to the ground. But there were too many of them, and they kept coming, their eyes burning with unholy fire. As I fought off the cultists, the dead continued to rise, their moans filling the air. I knew I had to stop the ritual before the necromancers could complete their dark work. I pulled out a vial of holy water and hurled it at the altar, the liquid splashing across the symbols and causing them to sizzle and smoke. The cult leader screamed in fury, his hands raised high as he summoned more dark energy. "You will pay for this, Hunter." I dodged a bolt of black lightning and fired another shot, the bullet striking the cult leader in the shoulder. He staggered back, his face contorted with pain and rage. "You can't stop us," he shouted, his voice filled with desperation. "The dead will rise and our master will reign supreme." I gritted my teeth and advanced on him, my rifle trained on his chest. "Not if I have anything to say about it." With a final, desperate cry, the cult leader hurled a ball of dark energy at me. I dodged to the side, the energy missing me by inches and striking the wall behind me. I raised my rifle and fired, the bullet hitting the cult leader square in the heart. He let out a strangled cry, his body convulsing as the dark energy dissipated around him. With a final, agonized gasp, he collapsed to the ground, his eyes wide and staring. The remaining cultists faltered, their resolve breaking as they saw their leader fall. I took advantage of their hesitation, firing shot after shot until the warehouse was filled with the bodies of the dead and the dying. The air grew still, the only sound the labored breathing of the risen dead as they stumbled towards me. I pulled out a bag of salt and scattered it in a wide circle around the altar, the barrier preventing the undead from advancing any further. With the cultists defeated and the ritual disrupted, the dead began to collapse, their bodies crumbling to dust as the dark magic holding them together dissipated. I watched as the last of the undead fell to the ground, a sense of relief washing over me. As I turned to leave, I heard a faint, rasping voice. "Grayson." I turned to see the cult leader, still alive, though barely. He looked up at me with hollow eyes, a twisted smile on his lips. "You think you've won, Hunter, but this is just the beginning. Our master will rise, and when he does, you will burn." I stepped closer, my rifle trained on his forehead. "Your master isn't going anywhere. Not if I have anything to say about it." With a final defiant sneer, the cult leader's eyes rolled back, and his body went limp. I stood over him for a moment, ensuring he was truly dead, before turning and leaving the warehouse. As I stepped outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the city. I took a deep breath, savoring the cool morning air. Another monster defeated, another threat neutralized, but I knew there would always be more challenges ahead. When I returned to my truck, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Lydia. "Well done, Grayson. The cult has been defeated and the threat neutralized, but we have received word of another potential danger. A powerful sorcerer has been sighted in the mountains. We need your help." I couldn't help but chuckle as I read the message. The hunt never truly ended, and there was always another monster to face. As I drove towards the mountains, the sun rising higher in the sky, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This was what I lived for, what I was born to do, because I was Jackson Grayson, the best monster hunter this side of the Rockies, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. As I drove toward the mountains, the city gradually gave way to rugged terrain, with towering peaks looming in the distance. The winding road took me higher and higher, the air growing colder and thinner. My mind was focused on the task ahead. A powerful sorcerer in the mountains was a serious threat, and I needed to be prepared for anything. Lydia had provided coordinates for a remote cabin where the sorcerer was last sighted. I parked my truck at the base of a trail and grabbed my gear, including extra ammunition, enchanted talismans, and a silver dagger. The path ahead was steep and treacherous, but I pressed on, determined to reach the cabin before nightfall. As I climbed, the trees grew denser, their branches blocking out much of the fading sunlight. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of my boots on the rocky trail. Every so often I paused to listen, my senses on high alert for any signs of danger. After several hours of hiking, I finally spotted the cabin nestled among the trees. Smoke curled from the chimney, a sign that someone was home. I approached cautiously, my rifle at the ready. The cabin looked old and weathered, its windows dark and foreboding. As I reached the door, I heard a faint chanting coming from inside, a low rhythmic murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Stepping into the dimly lit interior, the cabin was cluttered with ancient tomes, strange artifacts, and a variety of mystical symbols etched into the walls. At the center of the room stood a tall, gaunt figure, his back to me as he chanted over a glowing orb on a pedestal. The air crackled with magical energy, the atmosphere heavy with power. "Hey there," I called out, my voice echoing in the small space. "Mind if I interrupt?" The sorcerer turned slowly, his eyes burning with an intense, otherworldly light. His face was lined with age, his features sharp and angular. He regarded me with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "So you are the infamous Jackson Grayson," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "I've heard much about you. Glad to hear I'm famous," I replied, keeping my rifle trained on him. "You must be the sorcerer causing all the trouble around here." He smiled, a chilling expression that sent another shiver down my spine. "I am Asmodeus, and you are trespassing on sacred ground." "Yeah, well, trespassing is kind of my thing," I said, taking a step closer. "I've been sent to stop you, Asmodeus, so why don't you make this easy and surrender?" Asmodeus laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "You think you can stop me, Hunter? My power is beyond your comprehension, so we'll see about that," I said, my finger tightening on the trigger. "Last chance, Asmodeus. Stand down or I'll make you." He raised his hands, dark energy swirling around him. "Very well, Hunter. Let us see whose power is greater." With a shout, he hurled a bolt of dark magic at me. I dodged to the side, firing a shot that struck him in the shoulder. He staggered back, but the wound seemed to heal almost instantly, the dark energy knitting his flesh back together. "You're going to have to do better than that," he taunted, his eyes glowing with malevolent light. I fired again, aiming for his heart, but he deflected the bullet with a wave of his hand, the projectile embedding itself in the wall behind him. He countered with another bolt of dark magic, narrowly missing me as I ducked behind a table. Asmodeus's attacks were relentless, each bolt of dark energy more powerful than the last. I knew I couldn't keep this up for long. I needed to find a way to break through his defenses and take him down for good. Suddenly, I remembered the enchanted talisman Lydia had given me. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the small, intricately carved amulet and held it up, chanting the incantation Lydia had taught me. The talisman glowed with a brilliant light, and Asmodeus recoiled, his eyes wide with shock. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice tinged with fear. "Just a little something I picked up," I said, stepping forward. "Let's see how you handle this." I threw the talisman at Asmodeus, the amulet exploding in a burst of light and energy. He screamed in pain, the dark energy around him dissipating as the talisman's power overwhelmed him. Taking advantage of his momentary weakness, I rushed forward and plunged the silver dagger into his heart. Asmodeus let out a final agonized cry, his body convulsing as the dark energy was expelled from him. With a shuddering breath, he collapsed to the floor, his eyes rolling back as the light faded from them. I stood over his lifeless body, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The cabin was silent, the air heavy with the aftermath of the battle. I had done it. I had defeated the sorcerer. With a sense of relief, I turned and left the cabin, the first light of dawn breaking over the mountains. As I made my way back down the trail, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Another threat had been neutralized, another dark force defeated, but I knew there would always be more challenges ahead. When I reached my truck, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Lydia. "Well done, Grayson. The sorcerer has been defeated and the threat neutralized, but we have received word of another potential danger. A powerful demon has been sighted in the nearby desert. We need your help." I couldn't help but chuckle as I read the message. The hunt never truly ended, and there was always another monster to face. As I drove toward the desert, the sun rising higher in the sky, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This was what I lived for, what I was born to do, because I was Jackson Grayson, the best monster hunter this side of the Rockies, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. The desert stretched out before me, a vast expanse of sand and rock under the blazing sun. The heat was intense, but it didn't deter me. I had faced worse conditions and more dangerous foes. The coordinates Lydia had sent led me to a remote canyon where the demon had been sighted. As I approached the canyon, I noticed a series of strange symbols etched into the rocks, similar to those I had seen in the catacombs beneath the church. The air was thick with a palpable sense of malevolence, and I knew I was close. I parked my truck and grabbed my gear, including extra ammunition, holy water, and a set of enchanted chains Lydia had provided. The canyon was narrow and winding, the high walls casting deep shadows that provided a welcome respite from the scorching sun. As I made my way through the canyon, I heard a low, rumbling growl that sent a shiver down my spine. I moved cautiously, my senses on high alert, my rifle at the ready. Rounding a bend, I came face to face with the demon. It was a towering, monstrous figure, its skin a mottled red and black, its eyes burning with an intense, otherworldly fire. Horns jutted from its head, and its claws were long and sharp, glinting in the harsh light. The demon let out a deafening roar, its eyes locked onto me with a look of pure hatred. "Jackson Grayson," it snarled, its voice echoing through the canyon. "You dare to challenge me?" "I've challenged worse," I replied, raising my rifle. "Let's dance." The demon lunged at me, its claws slashing through the air. I fired, the bullet striking its chest but barely slowing it down. I dodged to the side, rolling across the rocky ground and coming up with a vial of holy water in my hand. "Take this," I shouted, hurling the vial at the demon. The holy water splashed across the demon's skin, causing it to hiss and recoil in pain. It let out another roar, its eyes blazing with fury. "You will pay for that, Hunter!" The demon charged at me again, its movements faster than I anticipated. I barely had time to react before its claws raked across my chest, sending me crashing to the ground. Pain shot through my body, but I forced myself to stand, pulling out the enchanted chains. As the demon lunged at me once more, I threw the chains, the enchanted metal wrapping around its limbs and binding it in place. The demon screamed in rage, thrashing against the chains, but they held firm. I approached cautiously, the silver dagger in my hand. "This ends now." The demon's eyes burned with defiance. "You cannot defeat me, Hunter. I will return, and when I do, I will destroy everything you hold dear." "We'll see about that," I said, plunging the dagger into its heart. The demon let out a final ear-splitting roar, its body convulsing as the dark energy was expelled from it. With a shuddering breath, it collapsed to the ground, its eyes dimming as the light faded from them. I stood over the demon's lifeless body, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The canyon was silent, the air heavy with the aftermath of the battle. I had done it. I had defeated the demon. With a sense of relief, I turned and made my way back through the canyon, the intense heat of the desert sun now tempered by my victory. As I reached my truck, I took a moment to catch my breath and drink some water. The battles were getting more intense, but I felt a sense of purpose that kept me going. I checked my phone, expecting another message from Lydia, but instead it was the sheriff from my hometown. The message was short and urgent. "Grayson, we need you back here ASAP. Something's happening. People are disappearing and there's panic in the streets." I frowned, my sense of accomplishment quickly giving way to concern. Whatever was going on back home sounded serious, and I needed to get there fast. As I drove back towards my hometown, my mind raced with possibilities. The battles were getting more frequent and more dangerous, suggesting that something larger was at play. If people were disappearing in my town, it meant that the darkness was closing in on a familiar territory, and I couldn't let that happen. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more spine-chilling tales. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and share your scary encounters. Also, consider joining the Fear Frequencies community for exclusive perks and early access to new content. Your support helps us create even more thrilling stories, and if you really enjoyed it, please consider leaving a super thanks. When I arrived in town, the streets were eerily quiet, and a heavy sense of dread hung in the air. The sheriff was waiting for me outside the station, his face etched with worry. "Grayson," he said, his voice tense. "I'm glad you're here. We've got a serious situation on our hands." I nodded, stepping out of the truck. "What's going on, Sheriff? What kind of threat are we dealing with?" "People have been disappearing over the last few days," he explained. "And those who have returned, they're not the same. They're like zombies almost. Dead but walking, and they're attacking anyone they come across." I felt a chill run down my spine. "It sounds like necromancy. Someone's raising the dead." The sheriff nodded grimly. "That's what I was afraid of. We've tried to contain it, but it's spreading fast. We need your expertise." "All right," I said, my resolve firm. "We'll need to find the source of the necromancy and put an end to it. Do you have any leads?" "There's an old graveyard on the outskirts of town," the sheriff said. "We believe the necromancer might be operating from there." I nodded. "Let's go, and bring whatever men you have left. We're going to need all the help we can get." As we drove to the graveyard, the sheriff filled me in on the details. The disappearances had started a week ago, and since then more and more people had gone missing, only to return as mindless, aggressive undead. The situation was spiraling out of control, and time was running out. We arrived at the graveyard just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the tombstones. The place was eerily quiet, the air thick with the stench of decay. I could sense the dark magic at work, a palpable presence that made my skin crawl. "Stay close," I instructed the sheriff and his men, "and be ready for anything." We moved cautiously through the graveyard, our flashlights cutting through the gloom. The sheriff's men were visibly nervous, their eyes darting around at every shadow and sound. I couldn't blame them. This was far beyond anything they had ever faced. As we approached the center of the graveyard, we saw a figure standing among the tombstones chanting softly. The figure was cloaked in darkness, but I could feel the power emanating from them. This was the Necromancer. The figure was cloaked in darkness, but I could feel the power emanating from him. This was the Necromancer. "Stop right there," I called out, raising my rifle. "It's over. Surrender now. The necromancer turned slowly, a sinister smile spreading across his face. "Ah, Jackson Grayson," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "I've been expecting you." I narrowed my eyes, keeping my rifle trained on him. "Then you know why I'm here. This ends now." The necromancer laughed, a cold, chilling sound. "You think you can stop me, Hunter? My power is far beyond anything you can comprehend." "We'll see about that," I said, my finger tightening on the trigger. With a shout, the necromancer raised his hands, dark energy swirling around them. The ground trembled, and the dead began to rise from their graves, their eyes glowing with an unholy light. "Protect the sheriff and his men," I shouted, firing at the nearest undead. The sheriff's men formed a defensive circle, their weapons at the ready. The undead advanced, their movements slow but relentless. I fired shot after shot, each bullet finding its mark and sending the creatures crumpling to the ground. But there were too many of them, and the necromancer's power was growing stronger with each passing moment. "Grayson, we can't hold them off much longer," the sheriff shouted, his voice filled with desperation. I glanced around, my mind racing. There had to be a way to disrupt the necromancer's control over the undead. And then I saw it, a large ornate book resting on a nearby tombstone, the source of his power. With a determined shout, I charged towards the book, dodging the grasping hands of the undead. The necromancer's eyes widened in surprise, and he hurled a bolt of dark energy at me. I dodged to the side, the energy missing me by inches and striking the ground. Reaching the book, I grabbed it and tore it open, my eyes scanning the pages for anything that could help. The text was written in an ancient language, but I recognized some of the symbols, protection spells, wards, and bindings. The necromancer screamed in fury, their dark energy intensifying. "You cannot defeat me. My power is eternal." Ignoring the ranting, I began to chant one of the binding spells, my voice rising above the chaos. The symbols on the pages began to glow, and I could feel the power of the spell coursing through me. The ground trembled, and the undead faltered, his movements growing sluggish. The necromancer's eyes blazed with rage, and he lunged at me, his hands crackling with dark energy. I held up the book, the glowing symbols forming a protective barrier around me. The necromancer's attack was deflected, and he screamed in frustration, his power waning. With a final desperate effort, I completed the binding spell, the symbols glowing with a blinding light. The necromancer let out a blood-curdling scream, his body convulsing as the spell took hold. The undead collapsed to the ground, their eyes dimming as the dark energy was expelled from them. The necromancer fell to his knees, his power broken, his body trembling. "It's over," I said, my voice filled with determination. "You won't hurt anyone else." The necromancer looked up at me, his eyes filled with hatred. "You think you've won, Hunter? This is only the beginning. There are others like me, and they will come for you." "We'll be ready," I replied, raising my rifle. "Goodbye." With a single shot, I ended the necromancer's life, his body collapsing to the ground. The graveyard was silent, the air heavy with the aftermath of the battle. The sheriff and his men approached, their faces etched with relief and exhaustion. "Thank you, Grayson," the sheriff said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You saved us." "Just doing my job," I replied, a tired smile on my face. "Let's make sure the town is safe." As we made our way back to the truck, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Another threat had been neutralized, another dark force defeated, but I knew there would always be more challenges ahead. When I returned to my house, I collapsed onto the couch, the weight of the night's events finally catching up with me. As I drifted off to sleep, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Lydia. "Well done, Grayson. The necromancer has been defeated, and the threat neutralized. But we have received word of another potential danger. A powerful warlock has been sighted in the nearby mountains. We need your help." With a sigh, I got to my feet, already reaching for my gear. The hunt never truly ended, and there was always another monster to face. As I drove towards the mountains, the sun rising higher in the sky, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. This was what I lived for, what I was born to do. Because I was Jackson Grayson, the best monster hunter this side of the Rockies, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more spine-chilling tales. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and share your scary encounters. Also, consider joining the Fear Frequencies community for exclusive perks and early access to new content. Your support helps us create even more thrilling stories.